dear listeners. Today's episode is on Tanith Lee's 1975 novel, The Birthgrave. The Birthgrave is a fantasy, sci-fi, sword and sorcery novel about a woman who sort of awakens in a volcano and is sort of cursed by this demon. And she doesn't know who she is. She knows she's from a different race from the other people. And the story is like her getting into various situations. She falls in with a bandit camp. She becomes a chariot racer, and she sort of gets kidnapped by this like evil wizard. It's a really interesting, psychologically complex sword and sorcery book. John and I talk about psychology, we talk about genre, and we talk about pulp writing as we sort of contend that Tanith Lee is one of the best pulp writers, and we mean that in a positive sense. So yeah, this is a great little conversation about an interesting novel. We hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome, ladies and germs, larders, and gentlemen, to the Infinite Library podcast. That was a terrible intro, terrible joke. I'm not very funny, and yet I keep trying. I'm your host, John.
And I'm your host, Ben.
And today we are here with I don't know. I think this is going to be kind of an interesting episode because this is one where I'll take full responsibility for it. I brought a book to book club. I felt very excited about it. Ben heard my pitch and you seemed into it, and I was like, "Oh, this is going to be a good ep. We're going to have fun." And we both read this book, and we both, I think, weren't as hot on it as maybe we expected to be.
Yeah, you can hear my precise delight and joy in the idea of Dark Souls of literature at the end of the last episode, and then as I was reading it, my jubilance slowly decreased. So we'll say, but I think we're still gonna have a fun time talking about it. So
absolutely. I mean, I think that I know we used to joke on the show about when are we going to get a bad one? And then we got a bad one in Telegraph Avenue. Yeah,
which listeners, you can refer to that one if you want to hear us actually both actively dislike something. So,
but I think again, a part of what I think our kind of credo here on the show is you can have an interesting conversation about any book, provided the person who wrote it wanted to create something interesting. I think we can say a lot of things about Birthgrave by Tanith Lee, which is the book we're talking about today. We can talk about maybe some of the flaws it has plot-wise, craft-wise, thematically. We're going to get to all that. But I think one thing we can't say here is Tanith Lee, the author, set out to paint by numbers here or make something just to fill a job. There's an attempt to be interesting and to push boundaries here, and maybe not always successfully, but yeah, I think we're going to find plenty to talk about.
Yeah, and I think she joins the ranks. We've read other first novels for this podcast, actually Chabon's Mysteries of Pittsburgh, as well as Notes of a Crocodile. And I think it was interesting reading her first novel here because, there are things about it that, as John's going to get into, she develops later that become more interesting. And then there's things that feel a little irritating at times. But, it's a first novel, so there's a lot going on. But I think we're also big on reading genre as well as, literature here. And so I think this was a fun exercise to read. This is like sword and sorcery kind of, but not really. And there's a lot other stuff going on besides your standard, like maybe Conan the Barbarian-esque idea one might have about this. So,
yeah. So I want to take a step back before we kind of get into the book proper. And I do want to, I feel like this is a book that like we've kind of given a lot of preamble even before sitting down here today to talk about it. Like you said, but we've been talking about like this is our attempt to find the Dark Souls of literature.
Right. What is it? Can we find it?
Yeah. A better way to put it is can we find a book that feels like playing Dark Souls? Or experiencing like the world of Dark Souls, and that's Ben. This is something I don't know if we've really talked about on the show much, but you've been playing through the Dark Souls games.
I have,
Soulsborne series more broadly over the last year. I am a huge fan of those games and have been for over a decade at this point. I played all of them except the Demon's Souls remake because I don't have a PS5. And, the storytelling in those games, I think, is something that you and I find just as compelling as the gameplay loops, maybe sometimes even more compelling. Those games are very distinct in the way they tell stories. And they probably tell them in a way that really only a video game could. But at the same time, if you're a book guy, you play those and it's like, well, could a book do this? Could I find a book that does this?
Well, the only way I can describe it is like, imagine a book that consisted of like footnotes to something whose true shape you can only guess at. like it's almost as if you are piecing together something through fragments and like allusions and placement of ideas, but they're all footnotes to the work that is dimly like recognizable, like through a glass darkly, as it were.
And also there's rad monsters.
Yeah, the grotesque, the awful, the horrifying. But yeah, could a book do that?
Yeah. And to make a long story short, Tanith Lee is someone who I've known her name for years now. She is someone who, again, if you are kind of in genre spaces, horror, fantasy, etc., like you're going to hear her name brought up, maybe not in like those first line, like big name conversations where you're talking about people like Tolkien or Zelazny or, Arthur C. Clarke, blah, blah, blah. You get what I'm saying. But, if you kind of get into that next layer underneath, she's someone you're at least going to hear about. And part of that is that she was prolific in a way that is really hard to even count, like even for someone who's like writing pulp, which I think we can say, she's working in that tradition. And we'll get to how, where that kind of pops up in this book. Ben, I shared her bibliography page on Wikipedia with
so many books. Yeah.
I haven't gone through and counted, but like it would not surprise me if she wrote over 50 books over the course of her life. And she only lived to be like, I think like maybe early, 67. So, I mean, obviously not like she died like super young, but theoretically, like if she'd lived longer, she could have kept churning them out if she wanted to.
Yeah.
So I finally got around to picking something up of hers earlier this year. I read the first of the Secret Books of Paradise, which are these series of kind of neo-Gothic novellas set in kind of this decadent pseudo-French fantasy city. And they are, I read the first one and I really like fell in love with it. It was, I thought the prose was really like decadent and like a little like overfloored, but like in the way you want something like that to be, really just lush descriptions of rot and decay and creepy old houses and weird, sexy people. And I got really into it. And again, like I was like, okay, where do I go from here? You know, sometimes you read an author for the first time and it's like, well, I want to read more. Like, where do I go from here? And again, because she wrote so much, I kind of didn't know where to go. So when Ben and I were talking about the episodes for this season, you know, I'd been looking through her bibliography and I saw her first book was kind of sold as this post-apocalyptic fantasy story about kind of this amnesiac protagonist like wandering through a world and like trying to make sense of how the world came to be like it is and like what their place in it is.
Which, who the character is.
Is like kind of the core of the Dark Souls experience for those who haven't played. You're a little guy in a big scary world. There's a lot of bigger, stronger people who have come before you and fucking died and are dead. And you're just kind of scrounging through the ruins, trying to figure out where you fit into all this.
And importantly, in those games, you get to decide who you are as well.
Yes,
and I think those are important too. In a sort of time-honored RPG tradition, is you get to build your character in this environment you've described, John. And it could be, you know, I mean, sure, there are some parameters, but it could be almost whatever you want.
Yeah.
I also wanted to just make a note about, I find pulp writers to be fascinating because I don't remember if Sam said this when he was on our episode when he was a guest, but Sam told me one time or on this podcast that sci-fi novels tend to be about 400 pages because it's just cheaper to print that much paper. And if you try to write shorter, you know, it costs more money for the publishing thing. And I think that sort of fact to me intersects interestingly with the existence of pulp writers who, we haven't really talked about them a lot on this podcast. They appeared briefly in Cavalier and Clay because the guy, I think Deasy, their sort of like mentor figure, also had a series of pulp novels. Sammy Clayman also wrote them. And the idea that like all of these publishing companies wanted to sell a lot of stuff, and again, it was cheaper to publish more than less. Suddenly all of these people are incentivized to produce tons of writing of various kinds, writing of different, you know, types, certain kinds, you know, pseudonyms, various things. And so I think the phenomenon of the pulp writer is one that I find fascinating in terms of like, what would you do if you could write that much? How do you go about doing it? What kind of things do you produce? And, you know, John, you allude to this. Not many people do that nowadays. Sure, there are some, but like usually it's tied up with like IP or, you know, certain big companies paying people to do that. And just being able to like write ream after ream of stuff, like you don't really hear about that as much anymore. And so again, they're an interesting phenomenon, and their relationship to print culture is worth thinking about in some way. But
yeah. I mean, again, I think that the closest analog is maybe like the types of directors who inspired the idea of auteur theory.
Yeah.
Kind of post golden age of Hollywood, where you had these film theorists like looking at what on the surface was like disposable, mass-produced entertainment, but kind of just because these directors were producing so much on such like a compressed time scale, like they could not help but like leave this very distinctive mark on the work they were doing. And obviously writing fiction is very different than making movies. Writing fiction is generally not like a collaborative process in the same way like an author is always going to leave their personal mark on a work in a way that maybe a journeyman director on a big movie will not. But there is something that comes in terms of like producing that much material. You're going to create in a really interesting way under the right circumstances.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know how relevant exactly this is to like this particular book because it is, again, her first adult novel, but it's something to think about. Yeah. All right. Well, then, like I said, I know we're both not feeling like this is like our favorite that we've read for this season, but I figure we might as well dig into it.
Yeah, let's jump in.
Like I said, I think that this book is playing with interesting themes. I think we're going to get into it, but there is interesting stuff here. I think most of the quibbles I have with this book are kind of more on like a plotting and craftsmanship level.
Yeah.
I think that there's like interesting stuff happening here in terms of the themes she's working with, in terms of the way that she's playing with the tropes of the genre she's chosen to work in. But yeah, I think that there is just a rawness here. Like this did not maybe get the level of editing I would have hoped for it to have, or something like that. I mean, some of it is just a first, like this does remind me a lot of Mysteries of Pittsburgh, and that it does feel very raw, and it doesn't quite feel cohesive. And I'm more drawn to it for like the couple like really striking images in the book rather than the book as a whole.
And there's a way that the book will do a sort of story or tangent or situation, and then due to the nature of the protagonist, just kind of moves on to the next one, which I find kind of almost like picaresque in a way, which is fascinating and interesting. Even if I find that she ends up encountering the same sorts of things in each situation, which leads me to start looking at my watch, so to speak. And we can talk about what those are, as we get into the specifics. So
yeah, no, and then there's something kind of towards the end where like there's sort of an attempt to make that purposeful, but I don't feel like it quite sticks the landing.
You're right.
Especially from like a standpoint of like explaining what was happening.
Well, and like if anything, like with Mysteries of Pittsburgh, it feels like a lot of the stuff is like, what would a person like, what would I do in this situation? It's first person. How would I react to this? Not saying like she's perfectly aligned with the protagonist, but like there's a kind of like you're there and you're reacting to something a lot like in Mysteries of Pittsburgh, where it's like the stand-in is just doing things that Shea Bond did in some way.
Well,
but,
I mean, no, Ben, I think that you're onto something there. And I know we just said we were going to get into it, but I did think of one other thing that's valuable kind of preliminary information. So Tanith Lee wrote this when she was 22 years old. Which again, I'll say for a 22-year-old, not bad.
Yeah, pretty great.
I've read way worse stuff written by 22-year-olds. But this book was really inspired by her personal dream life.
Yeah.
She was having really intense dreams and took that imagery and worked it into this narrative. And I think that the strongest parts of this book are the parts where it reads the most with that dream logic. The weaker stuff is kind of the connective tissue.
Yes.
Where she's leaning more into the genre trappings, but not quite sticking it all together. But I think that there is a degree to which this is, I'm not going to say autobiographical, but I think that the protagonist is a self-insert to some degree, but kind of a self-insert in like this kind of like therapeutic sense almost, where like this book really to me like read as someone like working through some very deep like unconscious issues.
Yes.
And like using this protagonist as kind of a stand-in to explore like their own mental landscape. So it's not exactly her, but I do think there is an element where it's like this protagonist is supposed to be her in a way, in a way that maybe a different protagonist by a more established author or an author working maybe more consciously in a genre space, trying to create like a Conan would not be.
Yeah, there's more removal. Yeah. So
yeah. So yeah, we start the book in a volcano, which is interesting. Our protagonist awakens, buried under a volcano, and they, again, this is as I'm describing this. Those of you who will play Dark Souls will understand why I saw these parallels when I was pitching it. She doesn't know who she is. She doesn't know her own name. She is just kind of risen from the dead, so to speak.
Yeah, a blank slate. Yeah,
a blank slate. And she, is like awoken in the dark, does not know where she is, who she is, what she is, and she is quickly sort of snatched up by this strange supernatural presence that appears to be occupying the space with her. She finds an altar with some ritual implements on it, and quickly there is this demonic force that overcomes her. And it says its name is Karakaz the Soulless.
Yeah.
And that it is the embodiment of all evil in the world, the sin of her race, and that essentially has placed a curse on her as this last living specimen of her people, and that she is condemned basically to wander the earth as a hideous creature for some unspecified wrongdoing by her people.
Right. And we should say, too, that the demon informs her that she could find her. I believe it's her. I have it right here. Her soul kin of green jade. So sort of this thing that is like her, and it's made of green jade or possesses attributes that are like her. And as well as the demon informs her that because of the curse, she will not know any joy or happiness. All will be misfortune and tragedy. And then also she's like shown herself, but she's covering her face because she's also informed that she's incredibly ugly.
Yes.
So these are all sort of these are all features that are wrought with we could say much psychology. We don't have to necessarily get into that, but that's all this sort of like starting Dark Souls attribute list, we might say. So yeah.
So what did you think of this opening, Ben? Because I will say it, like I liked this part of the book. I think that it's one of the stronger bits.
Yeah.
If only because it does feel like it really crashes you into this character, this world in this really interesting way. It doesn't waste a lot of time. It gets right to the chase, so to speak. We kind of get our setup for like the quest.
Yeah.
Because there must be a quest.
I mean, I was hooked because I felt like, as I kind of sort of hinted at, a lot of stuff's going on in terms of like self-image. Yeah, this curse of something, the demon being a she as well. Like the protagonist refers to her, the demon as a she. There's a lot of like, we could say like, dark persona stuff. Like I wanted to know more about the demon. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna watch out for, the green jade. I feel like you're given pretty much everything you need to sort of see how this character is going to play out. And I feel like my interest was, peaked, as they say. But
yeah. I also think that something that Lee does do well here is giving us like this amnesiac protagonist and not kind of cheating us out of that. It's not like they're having useful flashes of memory or something like that. Like as we get into it, she'll have like strange dreams that seem very fraught with meaning again, but like she doesn't even know her own name.
Yeah.
And we don't really develop a sense of what her history is for a long time, and
quite some time. Yeah.
I think standing by that is I like that she sticks to her guns there. So I will say, after we leave the volcano, this is frankly where I found myself. I didn't lose interest exactly. I remember specifically like the first night I started reading this, I was feeling like pretty tired already.
Yeah.
And I started reading this and I felt like kind of hooked. And then we leave the volcano and all of a sudden, like I was like very tired again.
Well, yeah, because she's immediately thrust into this role of the goddess. And, as she leaves the volcano blows up. And it's coming down the mountain, and like the lava is like going into a village, and suddenly like it's like she's thrust in this situation. And remember, she's an amnesiac, and so she has to kind of like figure out what to do. Given that everyone is hailing her as a goddess, the demon just said misfortune will follow her. Look, it's happening right now. What does our protagonist do?
Yeah. And that's something that, again, I think is interesting in this book, and I will get to it as we keep going on. There is something interesting in terms of kind of the way that Lee is playing with kind of the hero's journey, I think.
Yeah.
Hero's journey, is kind of the classic Campbellian sense. It's a very masculine story. It is about finding your power and going out and being active in the world, and then returning, with your deeds completed.
Yeah.
And I don't really buy into the hero's journey as a real heuristic for like understanding world mythology, but it is definitely relevant to fantasy novels because a bunch of people who wrote fantasy novels read Joseph Campbell and did think that it was heuristic for world mythology and literature, and just implanted it wholesale into their work. But Lee is doing something a little different here. Throughout the book, our protagonist, who it is a little hard to talk about a protagonist who doesn't have a name,
Right.
but she really, there are moments where she takes on an active role, but a lot of the time she progresses through the plot not by resisting, but by accepting.
Yes.
Like accepting something happening to her, and letting that kind of passive role put her into a more advantageous position to affect change later down the line.
Yes. Yeah.
So it is kind of this, in this very like kind of classic, like almost second wave feminist way, like sort of using femininity as like a weapon, while still like remaining like the protagonist kind of knows through, like they're not buying into what they're doing in this way. Like she never believes she's a goddess. She never, like in the way that maybe in kind of the more classic masculine fantasy, the protagonist would be like, oh, I'm a god, like I'm the destined king. Maybe they doubt themselves for a little bit, but eventually they must answer the call. They must accept who they are. And they are the promise, they are the prince who was promised. They do save the world. Whereas in this book, the protagonist is much more kind of taking a step back, letting something happen to them, having it lead them to be like proclaimed a leader or a goddess or what have you, not really buying into that role, but using the fact that they don't buy into that role to, at some level, like manipulate people, but also to win people over and to form connections with people in this very deliberate way. So, it's complicated. It's something that I think maybe reads like a little more sexist today. But I think at the time probably felt a lot fresher.
Well, and I like that you brought up the masculine protagonist because, the masculine protagonist would have been just making decisions and being like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take control here. And like one of the first things is like she realizes like, oh, these people think I'm a goddess, but I can only heal them if they believe in me. So I can't even do this thing that they think I do. And there's a sort of like immediate like shortcoming there. And she's like, fine, I guess I'm a goddess. I guess we're doing this now. And I think that's an interesting, point of view for a fantasy novel in terms of like, it makes it more about the social situation than about, like the character, asserting their will on the world. It's more just like, what do you do if you are hemmed in by social relationships, expectations, cultural norms, second wave feminist stuff, we might say. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a portion later in the book, I think one of the parts I like best, and I'm sure we'll get to it, but she more or less is like kind of taken captive in this kind of like decadent, almost like dark elf city, basically. And there were points in that section where I was like, why isn't she just get out of here?
Right.
Like, and then I was thinking about it, and it's like, well, I'm assuming like a level of agency here that isn't there. Like she can't just leave. That's not what she's capable of at the moment. Like my thing was like, I wanted Conan, like I was like, why isn't she like sneaking out through the tunnels? Why isn't she fighting her way out? Why isn't she using her magic powers to blast a hole in the wall? And and then I realized like, oh yeah, because she's fucking pregnant.
Yeah.
She's like 7 months pregnant. Like she can barely walk around.
And I mean, without getting too far ahead, she's pregnant at the bequest of an evil dark elf named Vazcor, who says that he's like her. He asserts that they're the same race and that he will teach her the ways that she has forgotten by her amnesiac condition. But that's what he says. So
okay, we'll get to Vazcor.
We'll go. Okay.
But Ben, I want to circle back just a little bit because you mentioned her healing abilities.
Yes.
So this is a fantasy story, and our protagonist does have these supernatural abilities.
Capital P powers, as they're indicated in the book. Yeah.
And she's able to heal, but only if like people believe she can. She personally has like a basically like Wolverine style like healing factor. Where any damage to her, she will shake off like in a matter of hours to days, depending on the extent of her injuries. Which presumably is how she was able to survive in this volcano for God knows how long. So this goddess role that she's been given is not like completely out of nowhere. She does seem to have some kind of supernatural gift, even if she doesn't understand it. The people around her don't understand it. They're superstitious village people. And that kind of leads me into the next thing I feel a little iffy about in this book. So I'm of two minds sometimes about the way that like fantasy authors tend to handle like world building cultures. They're I'd say kind of there are broadly speaking like kind of two divergent ways of doing it. One is you just kind of take like a real world culture and you change around the names a little bit.
Right.
You maybe use like a slightly more archaic like spelling of the name Eric for your Germanic-esque civilization, but you have things be familiar enough that the reader's imagination can fill in the gaps. You can be like this is and I think that this goes all the way back even like to Tolkien, and the way that you read about the Shire. And, he gives you like enough kind of heightened or different details. Again, like English gentry don't live in holes, but, there's enough of that there that you can imagine like what life in Hobbiton is like.
Yeah.
You understand, okay, these people have something like of the English country gentry like about them, even if, it's not quite as aggressive about it as some of these other depictions, where you have like, oh, this is Nippon, this island-based empire with samurai and ninja.
Yeah, the land of reeds. Japan. Yeah, the land of reeds. Yeah.
And again, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. These are bad. They're just tropes. There's ways of doing things. There's good and bad ways to do it. There's also the second thing is where you just kind of try to completely, make up your own thing. And that can sometimes be a little more compelling, but it takes a lot more work. And I think that when I think about what I found myself not enjoying about the way that this book handled its setting, I found the cultures that we kind of are watching our protagonist interact with felt really shallow and uninteresting a lot of the time. It is like this post-apocalyptic setting, and we don't really know like what has happened to the world. We don't know why, there is all this chaos, why all these civilizations, why are all these people like living in the ruins of like this older, greater civilization? But it's just kind of like particularly this first section, like these are just like, oh, these are superstitious like dirt peasants. They don't seem to really have much in the way of culture, apart from this like nebulous belief in this goddess figure. But even that doesn't, like, they don't seem to have much mythology. They don't seem to have stories they tell. Like, they are kind of there to be as boring as possible so that when an opportunity to leave this place arises, our protagonist has no qualms about leaving.
Yeah, and you know, we mentioned this, but I just wanted to stress, you know, she's not the same race of these people. She's a mysterious other race, which gets explained later. But I think that almost makes her, it's like she can see through this other culture so that it's like it becomes as boring to her as it is to us to read about it. And so we're much like, yeah, let's go on to the next thing. Are you talking about including the part where she falls in with the bandit camp? Are you like, because I was thinking
of the bandit camp. That's kind of like that's her excuse to leave.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because the bandit camp is like both more interesting and then also just like she can kind of see through it. Like, yeah. So, but
well, I think the bandit camp is interesting because it is the first part where we actually have real characters for her to interact with.
Right. Yeah.
Because the thing about the village, part of why it's also so boring is that there are really no characters there.
Yeah.
Like, Lee really does kind of treat these people kind of with a lot of contempt as the author. At least that's how it feels. Maybe this is intentional to some degree.
Yeah.
But I found this section a little bit tedious to read through because there didn't seem to be a lot of care taken in terms of like thinking about who are these people? Why do they live here? What do they do? They're just kind of there to be like a boring imposition so that we can understand like why she wants to leave with this mean, sexy bandit man.
Yeah. So enter the first tall, dark, sexy, handsome man, of which there will be many in this novel. And, you know, I find it interesting that, you know, I think because of this, we've described this sort of version of her going along with stuff. She eventually just kinds of going along with this guy. And she sort of falls into we could say like gender norms of this bandit camp. Who's the guy in charge? What guys are allowed to interact with her? Is she the bandit camp's woman? What is her relationship to other women? Because as the chief, he can kind of just sleep with whoever he wants. And he's, you know, into this goddess lady because she's different. She could maybe heal people, which would be advantageous to him. And suddenly, like, it's like, again, she's dropped into this social situation that she has to navigate as opposed to just leave.
Yeah. So the bandit chief, his name is Dirac. I'm assuming that's how it's pronounced. I don't know.
Yeah, but that sounds forceful and like percussive, like a Dirac knife or something. Yeah.
Actually, that's one other point I wanted to make. About the cultures. One thing that did get to me a lot in this book is, again, there's a reason why people tend to do the real world culture thing. And that's because it's really hard to like come up with constructed languages like on the fly.
Yeah, not everyone can be Tolkien.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and a lot of the names in this book just kind of glanced off my head, not in terms of like not so much like I couldn't remember who the characters were, but like Dirac, that doesn't sound like a real name to me. That sounds like, again, you ask someone, come up with the name for a barbarian hero character in a sword and sorcery novel.
You know what it sounds like to me, John? It sounds like a piece of wood hitting a stone. like it's just like a percussive sound. Yeah. So,
or again, you know, Vazcor, when we get to him, you know, that is, come give me a name for like an evil wizard in your Dungeons and Dragons module. And again, maybe that's intentional. Maybe that's her doing some kind of pastiche, but it felt flat to me. And it felt like this thing where these characters' names, they don't feel grounded in the world. They feel a little too light. And again, there are a couple moments where like there is kind of fake terminology that's, you know, supposed to be in other languages. Again, it just doesn't quite land. And again, I understand not everyone's Tolkien. Not everyone is a professional linguist who studied like 23 languages and can bring that to bear when they're making up their elf tongue. But it is something that's tricky, and it's something like, again, in my own personal writing, like I tend to not do the totally made up names thing because I find it really hard to come up with names that sound credible.
Yeah.
But yeah, to me it felt symptomatic of some of the world building problems here. But Dirac, back to Dirac. So she meets Dirac because he's basically rolling through this town, with
Right.
his bandit horde. They're like a biker gang, basically. And our protagonist is like immediately like finds him gross, but also finds him sexy.
And you're going to hear that formulation many times throughout this novel. My chungus ass barbarian husband is awful. I love him. And I found, like, I think that's an important thing to explore, right? Repulsion, attraction, the grotesque, like, her being into this guy, but and thinking he's sexy, but hating him. But she doesn't find that many ways to vary this kind of like formulation of this. And so it got to a point where I'd be reading something and I'd be like, where's it going to happen? And then the narrator says like, I hated him, but I liked him. Like, and it's just like, all right, okay. Like, so, but anyway, yeah, she immediately finds Dirac attractive, but also is repulsed by him. So, yeah.
So I agree with you, Ben. I found myself thinking as I was reading through this, I remember I was like halfway through the book and I just had this like little clarion bell ring in my head. And I was like, oh my God, I've asked Ben to read a romantasy book with me.
Yeah, we should play this. I'll play a siren effect now. Yeah.
And, I'm going to put all my cards on the table right here. Like, I've never actually read a quote unquote romantasy book, as like the term is currently being used to describe this genre that's so popular.
Yeah, Court of Thorn and Roses is one of the more recent examples. Yeah.
Yeah, but apparently not even apparently. Like, it is the dominant genre in terms of like sales at the moment.
It's keeping the bookstores open. So yeah.
Which we can feel however we feel about it. I don't think I'll put it this way. I'm not going to yuck anybody's yum at the end of the day. I don't think it's good for the literary landscape for one genre to primarily driven by like social media marketing to be the only thing keeping like any of these publishers afloat, but I don't have a solution to that. So I guess I'm glad that it's a thing.
Well, also, we were talking pulp earlier. That's probably one of the clearest like modern day pulp stuff is whoever gets to write these romantasy novels, because there's a lot of them and they're churning them out.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to say, again, having not read one of these, maybe having read some stuff that like inspired the people who are writing these now, in terms of like stuff I was like reading when like we were teenagers. I feel like from what I have read and listened to, like I feel like I kind of understand some broad strokes of this genre. And from what I can tell, the dynamic we're seeing here is actually pretty standard for romantasy. This idea of a woman with kind of this mysterious, untapped potential, kind of falling in with a man who is, dangerous and kind of mean, but strangely compelling and kind of undeniable. In her attraction to him
and charisma. And
the book being about navigating that relationship dynamic. I don't have necessarily like a hugely deep thing to say here because, again, I haven't read any of these books that everyone is talking about right now. But I do think it's really interesting that, again, this book was written 50 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's actually, I do think it's interesting. Like, this is a dynamic that clearly has been like working itself out through like genre fiction, I mean, probably forever. I mean, at least since Heathcliff, I guess. But I do find it interesting the way that like it is just kind of taken over everything in like the literary the genre literary landscape, at least. Like this book feels like an antecedent to like what people are writing now.
Yeah, I mean, there's traces of it in the Twilight series. There's traces of it in 50 Shades of Grey. There's traces of it in. I had another example, but yeah, the untapped potential is important because that gives that character growth, which she does display in this book. But I feel like the man doesn't have to change because he's like this object of attraction. And so he can kind of like, it's more like we get to know more about him, but it's not like he's the one who has to have character growth. Although I think 50 Shades of Grey might have some of that. I don't know. I weirdly only have seen the last 50 Shades of Grey movie. And I found that its resemblance to like pornography to be somewhat compelling because it's like there'd be plot and then there'd be like sex scenes, but the sex scenes would be like sensual. So anyway, that's all I'll say about that. But, yeah.
Nice. Yeah, so I do have one interesting kind of thing to tease out here. And I do think what is interesting here is, again, there is this kind of, like, I guess for lack of a better term, kind of bad boy dynamic happening here. Yeah. But Lee, crucially, like, does not actually, this isn't a romance.
It's not.
Like, this is not actually, like, I mean, spoiler alert, Dirac fucking dies and is dead, like, at the third of the waypoint. And then we switch to a different guy, and then he dies and is dead. And then there's a third guy, and he doesn't die, but that's for like reasons we'll get to.
Minor spoilers. He is her therapist. That's my reading of the end. Anyway, yes, Ben. We're gonna get to the Freudian reading eventually. Don't you worry.
But I think it is interesting, and again, maybe it's Lee kind of playing in this more second wave mode where, like, you have to acknowledge your like attraction in like a biological sense, but like kind of never losing sight of the way that the male animal is fundamentally disgusting.
Just disgusting and like and is dumb. Like there's a kind of like she like her, so she falls in with him, but like she's kind of also pulling the strings a little bit, like not completely, but like in her relationship to him and the way she orbits him. And then when we get to the whole chariot racing stuff, which I think might have been my favorite section of the book, it's like she's playing
hard.
She's playing like a crucial role to the success of the chariot race stuff because she's like the bow lady while he's driving the chariot. So
and again, I think that there's a very like fruitful metaphor there in terms of like sex relations. Or not sex as in, I think people get what I'm saying. Anyway. But yeah, this is also crucially the first part where we kind of see her gathering people to her. She kind of forms this like group of these three bandits who she becomes friends with. Crucially, like, does not sleep with them or anything like that, does not seduce them. She becomes friends with these three men, and they teach her kind of how to make her way in the world. They teach her how to fight, how to ride a horse. So we do kind of get this more classic heroic journey in terms of like learning how to survive in the world. And we'll see that kind of throughout the book, her learning as she goes. One thing that is interesting here is the quest kind of takes a back seat. You start this book, you think, oh, this is all going to be about like going to find this jade. Right. It's going to be in like some big scary castle on the other end of the kingdom. And it's all going to be about like getting there and getting this thing and figuring out like what that means. But that's not true. And this is where I think when I talk about like having issues with the way this book is plotted, this is kind of what I mean. I think that it's interesting to subvert this idea of like the all-consuming quest narrative and to have the book really be about the protagonist, like having things happen to them in this almost, like you said, Ben, picaresque way that keeps getting in the way of them going on their quest.
Right.
But at a certain point, like, I mean, the jade will come up very occasionally. Like when she's having a really bad time, she'll think about, man, I wish I could find the jade and like figure out like why I'm cursed. But for the most part, she's not really, it doesn't feel most of this book like she's actively trying to go on that quest. She gets stuck in these situations and then is trying to navigate her way through them, but very rarely out of them.
Yeah, and she will frequently say that she wants to leave, but then she won't for various reasons.
Yeah. And again, those reasons can be valid. Like they can be that she has grown to care about people. It can be just like, I'm in the middle of fucking nowhere with like this caravan. If I walk off, I'm just going to be lost in the middle of nowhere. But it doesn't, like, this book doesn't feel propulsive a lot of the time in the way you would think a fantasy novel would. Even something like Conan that's more episodic, you know, the individual episodes tend to feel like they have a little more narrative, like horsepower behind them. And this book, again, I think maybe because it's starting from like the place of a dream, it feels very meandering a lot of the time. And
very much so. Yeah.
You know, I think that there's like you could write I think this book, honestly, in some ways would have been stronger as like a novella. Like this thing is too long.
Well, it's about 400 pages, which, judging by Sam's rule, if it applies to fantasy, it's like they were happy to publish it because it meant, 400 pages means they could publish it for less than if it was 200 pages. So
yeah, but there's not enough plot here to stretch over that. The chariot scene when we get to Aram Kapoor or something like that. I can't remember the name of the city off the top of my head.
Yeah, I honestly can't either. Yeah,
it's cool. Like it's a really cool scene. It doesn't really need to be there.
Well, yeah.
I mean, honestly, you could almost cut the whole I think you could like write this book where she like comes out of the volcano. She lives in the village for a couple weeks. The like army of Vazcor comes in and kidnaps her, and we just skip that whole first section with Drac.
Well, so the Drac stuff's interesting though, because like she's sort of like the bandits kept woman, even though she resists that. But then when she does the bandit stuff, then she's suddenly almost equal to him. Although there's still some denigrating comments, he still treats her weird. They're presented almost as equally important in the chariot race. What did you think, John, by the way, that the other chariot people, do you know who the archers are? They're twinks. They're evil twinks. Like there's a part where they describe the evil twink archers.
Please use the proper term, Aromanoi.
Yeah, they're evil Aromanoi, and then it's like, then it's her and Dirac, lovers forever. But then they're presented kind of as like equals. But then, like tragedy ends up striking. But I do think that like she had to like go like, where's this Dirac thing going to play out? And she's like, yeah, I'll make them chariot racers and they'll become kind of like equals. And then I have to move her on to the next thing. So,
yeah, it's something where like we get like you could also have a version of this book where it's just up to the chariot race. I mean, you might want to change some stuff at the beginning. I maybe wouldn't start off with like she has amnesia, but like you could do like a story where it's just like, oh, this girl, like this kind of common girl, like gets picked up by this bandit chief. He treats her really bad. Oh, she turns out to have this potential. She like proves how invaluable she is. They like begrudgingly fall in love with each other. Yeah. Again, it's not particularly deep, but it's like a perfectly serviceable kind of like Benedict and Beatrice style, like romance.
Yeah.
That perfectly good, like pot boiler romance fare. But like, it's this connective tissue. It's the trying to make this into a coherent whole that I feel like you really see those seams and it really starts to not work. Yeah.
Especially when, it'll feel like things just start restarting. It's like, okay, now we're doing another thing. Yeah. So,
I mean, this book very, I think intentionally, like it wants to have this theme of like a cycle playing out again and again. And I think that is totally on purpose. I think it's very frightening. It's like traumatic repetition is kind of what is happening.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
again,
definitely.
We get to the end and we kind of figure out what's going on there. but it can also feel very tedious to read because the book is so long.
Yes, yeah, I agree, because the cyclical nature of it is intentional. It's just, it doesn't feel like the variations happen with a lot of difference. And yeah, it's like, oh, suddenly like she's with another guy that she hates but is also attracted to, why is that? But the chariot race is dope though. Durak is betrayed by at one point her and Durak sort of meet I wasn't sure how to take this. They almost were presented as like natives to this area, where they're
like tribal people rather than settled people.
Yeah, they're tribal, a tribal group. And so they're in this tribal group. She impresses one of the main people of the tribe. He offers her marriage. She declines because she's with Durak.
Crucially, they're an egalitarian society.
Oh,
like
that's a good point.
Women are treated equally to men as long as they can like prove themselves as warriors, which she has done.
Yeah,
in this guy's eyes. So like he's basically like the nice guy being like, "Hey, you should marry me, and I'll respect you." And she's like, I am sorry. I know Durak is a monster and he sucks, but and you're such a nice guy.
I can't be with you. Actually, there's this scene. I wanted to read the scene where that scene ends, because it's actually some pretty nice ambiguity. So basically Durak like leads her off with like a rope around her in front of this nice guy tribal character. And she says, we are honored by you're honored by your words, chief, but our laws are different ones. This woman is mine. That's what Durak says to the native guy. As Stu's face whitened, his hands clenched. I wanted only to break away to say, no, Durak, I am not anything of yours, and go to the white-faced boy, but I could not do it. Durak did not glance at me. His arm went up to salute the tribes and their chieftains, and then he spun us around, his free hand still on my reins, even before he had regained his. I had no free will left. He had stolen it, yet I had given it too. It was so terrible to be in his power, doubly terrible because it delighted me. Anger and joy to have him drag me with him away from all safety and hope of freedom, and to have no say in it. Durak, I called, let go of him. You will cut his mouth. Don't tell me, you damned bitch, he shouted back. The sky rushed in our faces. I've handled horses for 3 years or more before you broke your egg. But he was laughing. Both of us were laughing. I had forgotten the stew already and the ruins of any hopes he might have had, and his shame. So like, notice that like that tone of like a repulsion, attraction, wanting to break away but staying, and the fact that they both end up laughing even though he's like kind of manhandling her horse. That's like all of it right there. So
well, they're performing like that's why they're laughing. It's because like she doesn't really want to stay there. He presumably like can pick up on that.
Yeah.
But like they need to like camp it up so that they can save face in front of these people.
Yeah.
So again, it's this element of like finding power in like gendered performance.
Yes, which to me seems second wave, right? Yeah. So
very.
But well, so okay. So then after this is when they fall into the idea of being chariot racers.
Yeah. So they travel to this city. Kind of by happenstance, they end up finding out like there's this big chariot race. Durak, as he says, has quite a bit of experience with horses. They find out they kind of have a knack for it.
Yeah.
And then there's I don't think I've read that many chariot races in my literary career, but this was one of the more interesting ones.
Well, yeah, it was actually like tense and kind of like, it felt kind of like there were lots of things happening. Like there's certain courses they have to do. People can shoot at you from,
there's
the
obstacles.
Yeah. There's evil twinks who shoot at you. Yeah. So like,
and it has this very like Ben-Hur vibe.
Oh yeah, totally.
The city feels better sketched than like the earlier cultures did. Like it has this kind of like decadent, like Babylonian feel to it. But I think that what I found interesting about the chariot race is that, again, compared to what would happen in a again, like the masculine fantasy. You know, you have the scene in a more typical male-oriented fantasy novel. There might be tension, but you know that you pretty much know your protagonist is going to win.
Right. Yeah.
How they're going to win, you know, are they going to win by their own like wits? Or are they going to like have some 11th hour like magic power thing happen? You know, who knows? This felt a lot less certain to me in terms of like, are they going to win?
Right.
Because they're almost like, there's not like a narrative, there's not a reason why they need to win for the narrative to function. And that like, this is not proof, like them winning this would not like prove that she is a hero in the way that you might expect in a different type of story.
Well, and John, you were just saying about forgetting the quest. I feel like it's like this isn't related to the quest at all. It's like, it's like, oh, I'm doing this now because I'm with Duroc and this is what we're doing essentially. So
some would say it is a completely unnecessary aside.
Some would say this, yeah.
It does at least create interesting narrative tension from the standpoint that because we do not need her to win for the story to progress. It's not like, oh, if this guy knows where the jade is, and if we win the tournament, we get the money to pay him to give us the information.
Yeah.
They could lose. They could lose badly. They could, I mean, maybe not her, but Duroc could get killed in the race. And it would, at some level, like, it would still function. Like, it would still feel earned in a narrative sense.
Yeah.
And that at least did give it like a level of stakes that I didn't feel like it might have had otherwise.
Yeah, it's like a different kind of stake. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's also just like there's not you can tell like she put a lot of time and thought into like what this race was going to look like, which I guess I appreciate. Even if I was an editor, I would maybe say, do we need this?
Yeah,
do you just want to write a different story about people racing chariots?
If we're going to go to the NPC, the Dark Souls thing, I mean, this is like one of those levels that's optional. It's like you could do this level, but you don't really have to. Like, yeah. So, like,
yeah, but they win. They do win. But guess what? Duroc gets killed anyway. Like,
yeah, betrayed by the
Atsu,
the tribal guy. And he sort of expects her to be happy about it, and then she kills him. So in like a pretty brutal scene, which I enjoyed, but then I felt kind of a sort of, as you were talking about, tiredness set in when I was like, oh, we're gonna have to do this again. like after, because like, yeah, she kills the stew. She's like, you took Duroc away from me. Screw you. And then she moves on. So
I will say one thing about that part there. One thing we haven't mentioned is you might have picked up on this, but protagonist, not mentally well.
No.
Over the course of the book, she's been having like these really strange dreams about kind of what she thinks might be her previous life amongst her own people. It appears to be kind of this like decadent, almost like Kryptonian civilization.
Yeah.
Like very like crystal spires and togas. But also like people like women fucking giant lizards. Like very like Eldar from Warhammer 40K kind of vibes.
And they also enslaved people, right? Like so
but also like, but she doesn't know for sure if these are real. A lot of times like Karakaz will like show up in the dream and like torment her. Sometimes Karakaz is like whispering to her even like in her waking life. So there is like a question of sanity here. Like there's definitely an element when she kills Atsu where obviously she is upset, but like she goes like momentarily insane.
Yeah.
And so that is another part of the question here of like, how real is this curse? What is going on with our protagonist outside of her being an amnesiac? So then we progress on to part 2. I do feel like we maybe want to pick the pace up a little bit.
Yeah, we probably should. So
part 2 is a little interesting, I think, because part 2 is the point. Part 1 is very sword and sorcery.
Yeah.
Part two feels more kind of traditional heroic fantasy. There's a lot more kind of big power play stuff, interacting with nobility, dealing with kind of like affairs of state and
court intrigue,
court intrigue, magic, in a much more direct way than part one did. So to make a very long story short, she falls in with like another caravan. They all get killed by like a raiding party once they cross like a river. She gets buried alive, and is able to like dig her way out when she like recovers from that. And basically she gets picked up by like this passing patrol from kind of this, again, kind of decadent empire. They're not actually like dark elves, but like that's kind of the vibe they have. It's like this decadent, wicked civilization. Like this is actually the point where I think this is clearly like the quote unquote like culture or civilization that Tanith Lee was really interested in fleshing out. And I don't know if it's good exactly, but it's fun. You know, like they live in like these like city states built out of like cyclopean stone, and like everyone like is masked all the time. They like consider themselves to be like a successor civilization to our protagonist's people, who they refer to as the Lost Ones,
right?
Who were considered to be like this divine or like almost like kind of elvish civilization that we learned that like these people, per their legend, like they all died of like some kind of plague. But the people consider themselves to be like more or less an admixture of this species and humanity. One touch I found really evocative and interesting was that we find out that the protagonist people did not need to eat.
Yeah.
And so for this culture, eating is considered to like publicly eating is considered to be a shameful act.
Right.
It's eating in front of is like considered to be like defecation or urination in terms of like it's a thing. Like everyone knows everyone does it, but you're not supposed to acknowledge it, and you're definitely not supposed to do it in front of other people, which is something I had never. That's like an idea like I'd never come across in like a fantasy novel before, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting actually.
Well, and like she can drink this wine that's just as good as eating, but
it's Red Bull.
Yeah, they give her mystical Red Bull, and
it's your blue raspberry Celsius pen.
Yeah, the nectar of the gods.
But this is where we meet Vazcor. So Vazcor is
he's like Durak,
wizard.
Yeah, and he's like Durak Part 2, or Mach 2.
So not just that. So again, when we meet him, he's wearing a golden wolf's mask, and he takes it off, and the protagonist does not just think that he like resembles Durak, but thinks that he is either like a twin or literally him like reincarnated somehow.
Yeah.
Like as far as she is concerned, they are identical to one another. Unfortunately for her, they do resemble each other in that surprise, surprise, Vazcor is another possessive, self-obsessed man who treats her like garbage and sexually assaults her.
Yes, as well as I mentioned earlier, saying that he is the same race as her when in fact he is not.
Yes, he says in a particularly creepy twist, says that like they are siblings, that he is her brother. Not literally, but like in terms of he's not literally claiming to be her brother, but claiming like they are like the last two of their species. Yeah,
which very Freudian. So yeah.
But yeah, we find out pretty quickly that like Vazcor literally wants to like breed with her.
Yes.
And again, in sort of this passage of again the protagonist allowing bad things to happen to her to get the outcome she wants in the long term, she allows this to happen.
Yes. Yeah.
I actually think this is some of the more effective writing in the book. The parts where she is talking about how much she hates being pregnant, how she describes like the pregnancy as feeling like a haunting.
Yes.
Like it is this thing that is like possessing her and is unwelcome, but she cannot like be rid of. Particularly because of her healing powers. Like she tries to get an abortion like 3 separate times and it does not work ever. And again, like just given when this book was written, like this stuff felt pretty powerful to me.
Yeah. And I also, I think too, like we've seen her in these various positions, like goddess, or I guess we could say social situations, goddess, you know, charioteer, and then, you know, mother. And this is the one that she most crucially resists for various reasons that you've described. And, you know, Vascor essentially manipulated her into assaulted her into doing this. So,
yes. So there are more machinations. I don't want to get too lost in the sauce here because a lot of it's not super important to where we're going. And to make a long story short, there's a bit of yada, yada, yada here. There's like some machinations. Vascor tries to conquer some other cities. Seems like it's going well. There's a dramatic reversal of fortune. Vascor ends up like stuck in this tower where he is keeping the protagonist, ostensibly so that, you know, she can give birth to this child. And there is a revelation here that Vascor is in fact not a member of her species. He is in fact not even an admixture of the two. He's completely human. Just has learned to wield the power through kind of sheer bloody-minded force of will.
Right.
And this is naturally upsetting to our protagonist, who thought that she, at the very least, had potentially found a link to her roots, more or less.
Yes.
Only to find that she has been manipulated basically to be a broodmare for an evil wizard, which I'd be upset about personally.
As would I. So
may we never experience that ourselves. But yes, so that happens.
Well,
and
yes,
go ahead, Ben.
Well, she when she finds this out, she essentially blows up Vascor's brain, or at least enters his brain and shuts down all of the things where he knows things, how to do the power. So he can no longer do the power anymore. He's effectively castrated. And importantly, somebody has a baby who dies, and she replaces her baby with that baby. So
that is part 3.
Part 3.
You're getting a little ahead of yourself.
Oh, I'm getting ahead. Okay, yeah. So, but Vascor's brain gets blown up. He gets castrated. He can't do the power anymore.
He immediately throws himself off the balcony of this tower.
Really interesting end there for Vascor. So
it's left a little ambiguous as to whether or not like he realizes that what she's done and like wants to kill himself, or if just like the trauma of having his brain like fucked with just kind of makes him go like loopy for a second. He loses his footing and just slips. But either way, rest in piss, you absolute shitbag.
Yeah, get wrecked. Yeah. So.
I liked this scene just because it's fun watching rapists get owned.
Yeah, and it's also like, again, another interesting loop of the tall dark man sort of attraction repulsion thing. So
yes, which we're going to get to the root of here shortly. So part 3, she escapes the tower now that she basically is no longer being held. She falls in with yet another caravan, basically. This one is like a tribal caravan. It's a little weird. It feels like she's kind of as we're getting to the end, it feels like she's kind of remixing earlier stuff in a way that kind of feels like we're running out of steam a little bit here. Things pick up a little bit more here at the end because we do actually get some really interesting stuff. But this first part is a little tedious. But yeah, she falls in with this other tribal group. She ends up giving birth. this other woman has given birth to like a stillborn infant, and she like swaps them out so that she doesn't have to raise this
and
kid.
She does it, like she says, without thinking. It was the right thing to do. So she can reject this position of motherhood because she's her own woman. So
yes. And then she falls in with another tribal group who is going towards the ocean.
Yeah.
Crucially, one thing we forgot to say, after she leaves the tower, after she is castrated Vascor, she loses access to the power as well. So she has like lost her ability to heal her, or I don't know if she loses her healing over herself. I don't know if that goes away.
I don't think she does. Yeah.
Yeah, she suddenly, like, one thing that we haven't mentioned, because it actually doesn't come up very often in the book, she can understand all languages, which is another kind of weird thing about her, and that has gone away. So she falls in with this other group, and she can't understand their language. She, for the first time, is like having to try to learn to communicate with other people in like a much more deliberate way. She can't manipulate in the same way because she cannot speak.
Yes.
But this group is going towards the ocean. They go to the ocean. She finds out that there are like a whole ruined city of what is presumably her species is right there.
Yeah.
And she feels drawn to it. And this is where things start getting really weird.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
She commits to going to the city. She's like walking up to the city, and then she like rests for a little bit, and then 3 men appear out of nowhere, and they say what their names are, and they're just nonsense names. These characters have never appeared before now. But they are like the third iteration of a cycle. So there were the 3 bandits who teach her at the beginning.
Yeah.
When she's in the bandit group. There are 3 like guards that she makes friends with in the city who kind of become her like honor guard. And then there are these 3 men who accompany her into the city.
Yeah.
They go into the city. She finds this kind of sanctum room that has these kind of evocative murals on the wall that seem to be pointing towards whatever her destiny is. There's a woman who she thinks perhaps looks something like her. There are 3 knights in golden armor who are presumably the first iteration of this trio who have been protecting and aiding her over the course of her quest. There are the skeletons of those 3 original guys. So it seems like she's close to something, but she finds something about this place very disturbing and very upsetting. And she flees.
Yeah.
And then they're attacked by a dragon.
Yeah. I really feel like she was kind of like, okay, I know I'm sort of repeating myself here. Let's just have some weird stuff happen at the end here. So,
and I will say, it's some good weird stuff.
Yeah.
They get attacked by a dragon, and suddenly she gets power back, and she calls down like a lance of lightning from the sky to kill this dragon.
Yeah.
And she thinks one of the dragon has like killed one of the guys she's been like traveling with. Turns out he's fine. And then like he gets up, and they take her to a clearing where there is what is referred to as a hollow star.
Yes.
Folks, it's UFO.
Yeah, folks, it's UFO. She found it's UFO. Like,
that's right. It was aliens the whole time.
Yeah, this is where I started to feel like I was like, holy shit. Like I was complaining about this book being kind of like psychically repetitive, and then I was like, well, now she's just on a UFO. So
yeah, I mean, so there have been kind of some subtle hints in the background that there's something like this going on. There are we hear about like some stories about like oh, the gods, travel on shooting stars. And, there's a scene when she's with Dirac and they see like a golden shooting star, like traveling really fast through the sky in this way that seems unusual. So there's some stuff, again, in the background where it's like, oh, there's something kind of weird going on with the stars. And we find out, oh, it's because this planet has been under observation by like Starfleet.
The Watchers. Yeah.
Yes. So, she gets onto the ship and turns out that basically the ship is psychic. It runs off of like psychic energy. Like there's a psychic supercomputer on this ship.
Yeah, it's like a brain.
Somehow her like latent psychic abilities allowed her to like link up with it subconsciously. And like that is what the lightning bolt was in the scene with the dragon. She like basically activated the ship's defense mechanisms and like had it shoot this dragon from space and then like called it down. And so the crew of the ship is naturally like pretty confused because this is like a backwater planet.
Yeah, like how did you do this? Yeah.
Yeah, there's no reason anyone should be able to do this. They are kind of described very interesting. They are not the same species as her. Yeah. They are described as being human, but kind of like uncanny. So like they're described as looking young, but like with two old eyes. So presumably they have some kind of like rejuvenation technology.
Yeah.
But like they do still seem to age to some degree in a way that like she does not. So they're confused about her because as far as they're concerned, like this is a planet, like again, this is like this is a planet like you're not allowed to interact with because of the Prime Directive.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, someone has basically used psychic powers to like, call the Starship Enterprise down from space, and they're all pretty confused about it. So we meet our third tall, dark, handsome man, Rarm.
Another great name.
Not the best names. And yeah, once again, like she sees him and like immediately is like, what the fuck? You look just like these other two guys.
Right. Yeah.
Despite, presumably not even being the same species.
Yes. Yeah.
So they basically take her prisoner because they're like, what the fuck is going on here?
Another situation she's kind of forced into. Yeah.
Yeah. This is like kind of, she's confined in space. But what is revealed to her is that the computer, because of like its powerful psychic abilities, like basically this computer is designed to, like it's HAL 9000, except not evil. It is designed to like meet all the crews like every whim while they're like doing their jobs, like observing this planet, like presumably for like years, decades, maybe even centuries at a time. So, it can make them whatever they want in terms of food or lodgings or da-da-da-da-da. So it's a super powerful computer. It wants to help people to some degree. They say at one point, like, the ship loves having a passenger. It knows all of us too well, but it wants to help you because like you're like a puzzle. It has to like figure out what you want, which was interesting. But they're like, this thing can basically like read your mind. It can get it can get past your amnesia. You can relive your whole life basically through this, like virtually through this computer, and you can like figure out what's going on with you.
Yeah, this computer will do therapy. You'll receive. And this was like,
obviously we've already had a pretty big twist here.
Yeah.
We thought maybe we were going to find like out what's going on with like the Jade and with Karakaz, the Soulless, when they were in the city. Like that feels like, in again, the classic fantasy novel, like that's where we would have figured out, like they would have found the Jade there.
Right.
If not, like have known it was there the whole time, and the whole book would have been about getting there. Like at this point, like I was reading this on an e-reader, so I like had the percentage of how much of the book was left, like at the bottom. And this is like, we're like 94%. Like there's not a lot of time left to like get the Jade, if the Jade is literally like a magic rock she has to find.
Yeah, her twin.
Yeah. So again, in a move that feels a little weird, like the Captain Rarm basically has the computer like knock her out and like forcibly extract her memories.
Yeah, and she's like afraid of what the computer's gonna find, and she doesn't want to do it. So he sort of makes it happen.
Yeah, he like basically like anesthetizes her like in a literal sense, but like it almost feels like hypnosis in like a figurative sense, where it's like, oh, he has to like put her in like a trance state so that she can like access these memories. And this is real. Like, I know we just said we had a big twist in terms of like, oh, it was aliens the whole time. But there's a bigger twist here.
Yeah.
Folks, guess what? Surprise, it's Dr. Freud.
It was Dr. Freud the whole time.
The novel's about the unconscious.
Yeah. So this is where I was joking earlier. I'm like, this computer reads her mind and tells her what she wants, but it does the equivalent of like, talk therapy, where you get past the defenses and you get to the primal scene.
Yeah, she gets psychoanalyzed by this computer.
Yeah.
And we find out that she, was a part of like a decadent alien civilization of like, space elves on this, that like had colonized this world like centuries ago, had enslaved the human population, and, you know, lived as kings and emperors like over, you know, teeming masses of human slaves, until like they somehow contracted this strange plague that like wiped out their entire civilization over the span of like a couple weeks.
Yeah, and it's like described as being like hubris. It's related to their hubris as well. So
yeah, in a kind of a vague sense, you know, but it very much is like, it feels almost kind of Tolkienian and like, oh, like they, you know, it's like the dwarves, like, you know, digging too deep,
or the Numenor, the kings of Numenor.
Yeah. So it's still like, that's what I do like about this, despite kind of this like anti-supernatural twist at the end. There still is kind of this like air of mystery and like transcendentness to this, despite kind of playing very fast and loose with like fantasy tropes. But basically like her and her father like ended up going with a bunch of other nobles to like this like basically temple where people were quarantining, or I guess like sheltering in place actually, and trying to like wait out the plague like Decameron style.
Yeah.
And while she's there, it's discovered by the priests that she has the power, and the priests are like militantly against the power. In fact, this one particular priest is convinced that like the power is the source of the plague.
Yes.
And that her having the power is going to kill everyone in this temple. It's going to lead to absolute ruin. And he tries to like basically exercise the power from her by being an abusive priest. Not in a sexual way, at least.
Yes, yeah. But he's the...
But, like, he makes her, like, repeat over and over again that she's worthless and soulless and evil and, like, is the sin and ruin of her people. And, what? Some of these words should sound a little familiar.
Where have I heard this before?
Where have I heard some of these words? We find out that it was her unconscious the whole time. Caracas the Soulless was her unconscious. Her attraction to these dark, brooding men was because she had this image of this evil, masculine figure domineering over her, telling her she was worthless, making her suppress her abilities.
Yeah.
We find out that turns out the men didn't look anything like each other. In fact, it was just her like unconscious like noticing of like
types.
Basically her projection onto these men.
Yeah.
Because like we find out Rarm is not a bad guy.
No.
He's actually not like, he's trying to help.
Yeah.
He's maybe being a little too pushy about it. But we actually find out like he is probably going to like get court-martialed when they get back to their home planet for helping her.
Yeah, the Starfleet directive.
Yeah, because he's literally he's violated the Prime directive to try to give this woman talk therapy.
Yeah, the best talk therapy ever. Yeah. So
and so like he again is maybe like a little like domineering or like cold, but he's actually like a good guy. Like the first, so he's not Durak, he is not Vazcourt, he's not, I think Sekish is the name of the priest. And so we find out she's been projecting this whole time. Karakaz the Soulless is not a demon. It's like the unconscious image of herself that she has been carrying around as
which is worthless. Yeah, will only know misfortune. Is hideous. Yeah, all of the negative qualities.
And we find out that she has not been hideous this whole time. Something that has been she's been masked most of the book. She either is like wearing like a veil, or again when she's in like the decadent city, she's wearing like the mask like all the other people. But whenever she reveals her face to someone, she assumes that they see how hideous she is and they're terrified of it.
Yeah, they always like look at her like really intensely, and she's like, "Oh, I look evil." Yeah.
They probably were just confused.
To reference another book, she literally is the prettiest girl of all time. She's the Peacoat in Infant Jest.
That I was a little bit iffy about. There's something a little uncomfy about the way that she is described in terms of like she is ivory pale, platinum blonde hair, incredibly lithe and sinuous.
Yeah, 10 out of 10 smoke show. Yeah.
This is what Tanith Lee at 22 is like. This is what the perfect woman looks like. Everyone else is hideous. And we find out, her powers are actually so powerful that she was like suppressing them unconsciously. She never actually lost the power or couldn't do these things. She was unconsciously suppressing her gifts because she was scared of her own power. Which, in terms of like a metaphor for the therapeutic process, a little grandiose in terms of like, as someone who's going through psychoanalysis right now, dealing with some similar hangups, I don't think it'd be good for me if my therapist told me like, no, you don't understand, John. You can understand all languages and rearrange molecules with your thoughts.
Yeah, it's like you go out of therapy and you're just like the overman or something.
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
Yeah.
I think maybe as a metaphor for like overcoming, like I read this book as very much like a metaphor for like overcoming depression and like self-hatred, and particularly doing that as like an artist and like discovering the power of your creativity. Like I can get a little bit, let me put it this way. I understand like the way of viewing making art as like a divine act where it's like, oh, I'm creating from nothing. Oh, I'm imitating the divine in my act of creation.
Yeah.
I think that can be actually a beautiful sentiment sometimes. Most of the time it's very pompous.
Right.
I do think, at least in this case, again, it's a little grandiose, but it doesn't feel ugly.
Right.
It doesn't feel like, I mean, again, there is a little bit there where I'm kind of like, okay, but you are saying you're better than like everyone else in the entire world. But at the same time, like in terms of kind of like realizing your own potential and realizing like, oh, I'm not ugly and worthless. Like I have all this potential to shape the world and create beautiful things. I think that's actually lovely. I think it's expressed in the register of a 22-year-old.
Right, which is you're holding yourself back, like, this thing that happened to you before is controlling you, but you can let it you can decide how much it impacts you, like you can do something else. And I think too, like the you could even read it as internalized misogyny if you wanted to, using like the second feminist lens, where it's like second wave feminist lens, where it's like, yeah, like a lot of people were denigrating her in this book, even though she was a goddess, and now she's like, I actually am capable, powerful, and can take control of my destiny. And I think
she doesn't need a man.
And she doesn't need a man. And I think it's like a moral that's pretty good. Like I feel like that's a good arc, as you were saying, even if it is a little grandiose. I did find that at the end I felt a little underwhelmed because like I was saying, the sort of repetition compulsion, which is very like, Freudian therapeutic. And then it's like, for character arc, it's pretty good and it feels real. But I don't know. It felt a little too like Deus Ex Machina alien computer therapy, like something like that. But
yeah, again, that's where I keep coming back to this idea that like there are good ideas here. Yeah. There are interesting themes. There are striking images. There's beautiful prose. I know we haven't read a lot from it, but there are some really striking descriptions of things. Like there's a great description of like a beautiful coffin, like an intricate sarcophagus, or even like when they're in the ruins, like the description of these murals is really evocative.
Yeah.
A lot of really nice like words spilled on like depictions of art and like architecture that I enjoyed a lot. But it's the connective tissue. It's the fact that each of these cycles we watch her go through feels so baggy and don't feel like they're leading towards this conclusion in like a propulsive way. It feels like, and again, some of this is, again, I think the tension between trying to do something like thematically intentional with repetition, with feeling stuck, with feeling depressed. There's a way in which, again, her getting stuck, it's a metaphor for depression. It's also a metaphor for like being a woman and being held back by society. That's all intentional, but there's just not quite enough. She's just not quite a talented enough writer yet to tie all that together into a narrative that feels like it's carrying you along in this way that you want genre fiction to. Like I felt like this book very much kind of felt like a roller coaster where it's like you go all the way up and then all the way down and all the way up and all the way down and all the way up and all the way down. And, that can be thrilling in moments, but it can also get kind of boring because there's no surprise. I mean, there are surprises at the very end, but kind of in the middle, it just kind of feels like we're spinning our wheels for a lot of this.
Right, especially too, like that also makes me think of the Mysteries of Pittsburgh ending, which I remember we were like not exactly thrilled about, and I kind of felt like he just had to stop the story. Now I'm in Europe now, but like I think like the way she wrote this, it feels like, if, as you were saying, we could have cut the whole chariot interlude out. It felt like she had like this sort of repetition thing, and then she's like, all right, now it's time to end it. And she had the end scene in mind. But yeah, it almost feels disconnected from everything. So,
well, I almost feel like the book either needed to be significantly shorter, or this needed to be like a trilogy.
Yeah.
Where it's like each, the first book is all about her relationship with Dirac. The second book is all about her relationship with Vascor. The third book is all about her relationship with Rarm, and then her like eventual like self-actualization. But it's just kind of in this awkward middle zone where it's like there's either too much or not enough.
She did write 2 more books after this, which I'm curious about the plot lines.
Me too, because I feel like this felt like it feels complete at the end.
One of them is called Vascor, Son of Vascor, which
so presumably that's about the baby.
And then the third one is the Quest for the White Witch, or also titled Hunting the White Witch. So I wonder what direction they took it. I was finding it difficult to find more information about them online without just reading them. But
yeah, Ben, I appreciate you reading this one with me. I don't regret reading it. I
don't either. Yeah.
It feels really interesting. I definitely want to explore Tanith Lee's bibliography more. I think that it is really interesting. I think that the way books tend to be written now, people tend to have so much more of a latent period before they get their first thing written, unless you are a Nepo baby.
Right.
You know, most people are like doing an MFA, or they're, you know, really grinding away at like their manuscript for maybe years before they're able to actually get it picked up by someone. Or they're doing what I did and they just kind of wrote a novel that they never intended to see the light of day, just so that like my equivalent of this, no one will ever read it.
Yeah.
But I do think there is value, again, and especially from the standpoint of someone like Tanith Lee, who, again, from here goes on to write like 70 fucking books. Like seeing where you start.
Yeah.
And where you end up. And I appreciate, like, the fact this book is messy, like, I appreciate that. Like,
Yeah.
I appreciate that it feels like raw and kind of unfinished, even if it's not always the most pleasant reading experience.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly well said. I think again, I feel like that structure of repetition compulsion feels very modern, and I feel like having little experience with this kind of genre as you do, John, it was sort of nice to see, like, you know, a different thing that's not exactly Conan, that is in the same sort of world. But yeah. I also agree. I feel like it's a little. Yeah, I was there. The fatigue set in at various points, as we've discussed, involving like connective tissue and like the restarting of the roller coaster stuff. So
yeah, like if you want to get into Tanith Lee, I wouldn't recommend this be where you start. And I don't know where I'd recommend. I mean, I guess I like the Secret Books of Paradise a lot. Maybe start with those. But there's, again, 70 of them. It's kind of hard to know where to start.
Well, that sounds like in that one, John, she was kind of playing with these sort of gender things, but in a more like assured way, as opposed to kind of being
exactly.
like here, you know, let's put her in this situation and see what happens. Okay, let's put her in this situation and see what happens. Like, and that one, it's like, here's the thing. So
I think more than anything, she just had developed a lot as a writer.
Yeah.
And was much more confident about working in the registers that they were working in. You know, this book is trying to work in like a sword and sorcery registry. Again, there is a lot of room to write about gender dynamics in this kind of a setting. There's a lot in sword and sorcery that smacks of gender, but it just doesn't feel like she's quite confident yet, which, again, totally fair. She's 22. I couldn't have written this at 22.
Yeah, I couldn't either. So the idea of the dreams, though, like you had mentioned, John, makes me wonder if parts of this were inspired by like talking to someone about her dreams, because the sort of processing of things seems important to the book. So yeah, but,
I can't really imagine someone having written like that last part where, again, the protagonist like has their breakthrough without having been through psychoanalysis or some other kind of talk therapy.
Yeah.
And really like coming to understand like what this feels like.
Right.
Or at least like having read about it.
Right. Yeah. So it's like, I don't know. It's interesting that it's in there. You know, we're gonna psychoanalyze a sword and sorcery protagonist, kind of. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, you know, I don't think we found the Dark Souls literature, unfortunately, Ben.
We're gonna keep looking. So
I'm gonna pitch a book here. I think I lent this to you. The Western Passage by Jared Pachacek. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right.
You have told me about that. I don't.
It was
think
on my list of what was one of my favorites last year.
Yeah.
But I think we should do it for the show.
Yeah. I mean, I'm down.
Cool. Well, we'll keep you posted on that, listeners. Well, Ben, do you have anything else to say about this one? I don't know about you, but I'm sweaty and gross because it's really hot in my apartment.
Yeah, we've talked through the heat madness, so I think we need to immediately commence to cooling down. So yeah, I don't have anything left other than stay tuned for the next episode, because we'll be closing out our 2666 read through on the part about Archibaldi, my favorite part of the book. So
hell yeah. All right, listeners. Well, thank you so much as always. We really appreciate your support. We'll see you again in 2 weeks. Until then, stay cool and Semper Books.
Semper Books.
Thank you for listening to The Infinite Library. If you liked our show, we hope you'll subscribe and leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or the podcast app of your choice. It helps us a lot. If you want to follow us on social media, we can be found on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky at Infinite Library Pod. If you'd like to contact our team directly with episode ideas or feedback, email us at infinitelibраrypod@gmail.com. Our intro music is by Amos Legend in the Forest of Mayhem. Our outro music is by DJ Daggy Diggs, and our logo was created by Lars Noir.